Question: why some fallen beings are most difficult to spot? What makes those fallen beings most difficult to identify? Well, there's two aspects of this. First of all, you need to know what a fallen being is in order to make sense of this answer, but you can find that out in my video about how the world was created. And so when you know what a fallen being is, the one aspect you know is that a fallen being, it's not that there's anything fundamentally different between you and fallen beings. It's just they are very old beings. They've had a very, very long time to build their sense of a separate self. So they've had a very long time to use the duality consciousness. And you could basically say, one way to describe the duality consciousness is, it's creating a facade that's hiding what is behind it. So the fallen beings are very, very good at creating a sense of self, projecting a sense of self, projecting a facade that makes them seem like either very smart or very good people, very capable people, but you don't see the complete selfishness and self-centeredness behind it. And that's one reason why Jesus said 2,000 years ago, on their fruits ye shall know them. Because that's one way to see it, that they pretend to be a certain way, but they're doing something that is opposite of what they're portraying, the image they're portraying. It's like you're not walking your talk, as the saying is. But that's not the only way, because there's actually a lot more subtlety to it. And so the one factor is they're very good at creating a facade and hiding who they really are behind it. But the other thing is that they are very good at using the duality consciousness. And there's a special aspect of the duality consciousness which we can call the serpentine mind. And it refers a little bit to the story of the Garden of Eden in Genesis, where Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden and they've been told that they are not allowed to eat of a certain fruit, because if they eat that fruit, they will surely die. And then the serpent comes and says, "Thou shalt not surely die. Instead, you will become as a god, knowing good and evil." And I've explained this before, that it wasn't actually that they were lied to, Adam and Eve, because the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil is the duality consciousness, where good and evil, you are defining good and evil. But it's not in an absolute way. It's not based on the Christ mind. It's based on two relative polarities. You're defining both good and evil in the duality consciousness. And therefore, you become like a god, but you are not like the God, the real God, who is not dualistic. See, you become a dualistic God. And so, when you go into duality, your sense of self as a connected being does actually die. But you are reborn into a sense of identity as a separate being. And that was the symbol of them being cast out of paradise, because now they are no longer connected. And so they did die in a certain way, in a spiritual way. They just didn't die in the sense that they disappeared. So this is the serpentine mind. And what I have explained in duality, and what's so difficult, it took me so many years to grasp this, is that in duality can come up with arguments for or against any question or issue. And they seem valid. Because see, here's the deal. I'm simplifying it, but just to give you an understanding of the dynamic. In duality, you always have two opposite polarities. Now in duality, you of course also have a range in between the two extremes. And they are also all dualistic. It's not like you can go to a midpoint and say, oh, this is not dualistic. No, you have to transcend the scale. But just to make it simple, right? So you have one dualistic polarity that says things are a certain way. And then based on that, you come up with a line of argumentation for why it is that way. Then you have an opposite dualistic polarity that's arguing about the same topic. I'm not being specific for a reason because it'll just confuse things, I think. So you have an opposite dualistic polarity that's arguing about the same topic, but from the opposite vantage point. And it also comes up with arguments. So what determines whether you think one is convincing or the other? Well, it just depends on whether you lean this way or that way. Because you can't stay completely neutral. There's really no neutral in duality. You have to lean either to this side or that side. And if you are leaning to this side, then the arguments presented by this side will seem convincing to you. Another person leans to the other side, and therefore the arguments presented by that side seem convincing to that person. But you see the problem here. Even if you lean to that side and you think this is the ultimate argument, it's not, it's just an illusion. It's all an illusion created in duality. And when you don't grasp that, you can't see through the fallen beings. Because here's a fallen being that has set itself up, being very, very convincing, having this very sophisticated argumentation for why it's right. And if you're leaning to that side, the argumentation will seem completely convincing to you. And you can't see that this is a fallen being who is completely self-centered. The person claims to be, let's say a religious leader, but isn't. It's just a fallen being. But you can't see it. You can only see it through the Christ mind. You cannot see it through arguments. That's why I'm saying you can look at specific arguments in the world. And if you look at them from inside duality, you cannot intellectually reason these are wrong. Only when you step outside of the duality and connect to the Christ mind can you see, oh, the argument is unreal. So what does that say about the person who is absolutely convinced that the argument is real? Well, it could very well be a fallen being. Even though the person seems to be this very spiritual guru, or a philosopher, or a political figure, a world leader maybe. But you can't see it from inside duality. And therefore you can't see that the person who is promoting this and who is so sure that he or she is right, you can't see the emptiness behind it. And as I said, with the serpentine logic, the serpentine logic is sort of a more aggressive aspect of duality, where it isn't just arguing, but the serpentine logic is aggressively seeking to undermine basically your intuition, your connection to the Christ mind. It's seeking to sabotage your connection to the Christ mind by putting you into doubt. So you could say, Adam and Eve's story. They had some connection to the Christ mind. And this gave them the impression, you're going to die if you eat of duality, of the duality. If you partake in the duality consciousness, you're going to die because you're going to be lost in it and you can't find your way back on your own. And as I explained before, it wasn't that they weren't allowed to partake of duality because we all have to do that as part of our growth. But you can't do it until you reach a certain level of maturity. Because if you try to take that initiation too early, you become lost in it. So this was actually a correct statement. But the serpent then comes in and aggressively undermines that. Says, oh no, you don't have to wait until you're ready. You can do it now. You're smart enough. And then they do it, and then they're in duality, and now they can't reason their way out of it. They can get out of it by connecting to the Christ mind. But this is what the serpent will then try to keep them engaged in this whole dualistic reasoning that keeps them from looking within or going within and reaching beyond. So some fallen beings are very, very good at using this dualistic reasoning. I mean, I have several times, I've read some statements where I said to myself, my goodness, I can't come up with any argument to disprove what's being said here. Now, I knew intuitively, because I can read the vibration of something, that it wasn't from the Christ mind. But I could not in my reasoning mind come up with an argument against it. And what I realized was this, just like I said, there are the two arguments. And whether you lean, if you lean to this side, then this argument seems real. And you can't come up with any arguments against it. And what I realized was that if you accept the basic premise from which the argument is made, you can't come up with any valid arguments against it. Because the basic premise sets the stage for the end conclusion. You can't dispute your conclusion if you accept the premise. This is part of duality. It's the principle that some people say it's the privilege of formulating the problem, defining the problem. You can define the problem in such a way that it leads to an inevitable conclusion. It's essentially what Marx did by defining capitalism and communism as two dualistic polarities. So what I'm saying is that that's why it can be difficult, and the only way to get out of this is you don't try to come up with arguments. You strive to step out and reconnect to the Christ mind. And I think all spiritual people have some intuition, and you can really make an effort to sharpen that intuition. Many tools and teachings the Ascended Masters are given. Again, I have the book called Connecting to Your Spiritual Teachers, which is a good place to start. And you can sharpen your intuition, because really when you are, as I said, the fallen beings have had a very long time to build this separate sense of self that's really good at using the duality consciousness and the serpentine mind. So they can often overwhelm you or paralyze you. That's why you see some people are pulled into following these fallen beings, like Hitler, for example, who pulled people in. They were literally hypnotized by him. And you see a world leader right now who's doing the same thing. I will not mention any names. So there are people who are doing this. They're fallen beings who are very good at doing this. And if you don't have Christ discernment, as you can call it, you cannot with the reasoning mind see what's wrong there. But when you have the ability to read people's vibration, then you can instantly see it. I mean, I have many times I've had this experience that I'm looking at the picture of a person, and I just instantly in my heart sense either, oh, that's a fallen being, or oh, that's a dark being, or I just feel a repulsion. I don't even want to have anything to do with that. I remember many years ago somebody showed me a picture of a famous Indian guru that I had never heard about before. And I almost felt like physically I was pushed back from the picture because he had such a dark aura. And so ultimately the only way to expose the fallen beings is to develop that Christ discernment. But I think it's something that all people can do if you really dedicate yourself to that, because this is of course what the spiritual path is all about. You're increasing your connection to your higher self and to the Ascended Masters and to the Christ mind. So it's helping you grow also. And it just comes to that point where you can look beyond the argument. It's like instead of going into reasoning about the arguments, you just read the vibration behind it. And therefore you instantly know there's something missing here. You may not even be able to, with the linear mind, say, oh, this is wrong or that is wrong. You just sense the vibration behind it is just not there.